My name's Frank. Frank Kowalski. 67 years old now, but this story takes me back a lifetime. Back to when my hands were calloused from the livers, not stiff from the arthritis. Back to when my office was a cramped metal cab, swaying 100 feet over God's green earth, or usually, God's black night. I was a crane man, see? P&H, Manitowoc, Lorraine. If it had a boom and a hook, I could make it dance. 30 years I spent up in those things. Thought I'd seen it all. Learned a man's got no business believing in things he can't see, touch, or measure with a steel rule. Then I took a job down in West Virginia. Point Pleasant. Autumn of '66, stretching into winter. They were putting up a big chemical plant expansion, right there on the banks of the Kanawha River. Needed experienced operators for the heavy lifts, round the clock. I was on nights. Suited me fine. Less bosses breathing down your neck, and I always liked the quiet. Or what I used to think of as quiet. The town itself, well, it was a town. Sleepy, mostly. Nestled in the hills, where the Kanawha met the Ohio. Nice enough folks, but a little set in their ways, you know? The kind of place where stories got passed down like grandma's china, whether they held water or not. The work site was a hive of activity during the day, mud and steel, and the roar of machinery. But come sundown, it emptied out, leaving just a skeleton crew and me, up in the sky, watching the river flow by like black oil. The first few weeks were just work. Long hours, the air getting that crisp autumn bite. From my cab, I'd watch the lights of Point Pleasant flicker on as dusk settled, the headlights of cars crawling over the old silver bridge that spanned the Ohio. Sometimes, on a clear night, I felt like I could see clear to next Sunday. The hum of the crane's diesel generator was a familiar lullaby. Down below, the ground crew would be taking their breaks, coffee steaming in the chill air, their voices carrying faintly up to me. Normal. We had a mixed crew. Some locals, some of us, brought in from out of state. Lunch breaks, or midnight breaks for us on nights, were usually in a drafty site trailer, huddled around a kerosene heater if it was cold enough. That's where you'd hear the talk. Hear about Jimmy Henderson's boy? Old man Davies, a local rigger, might say, stirring his coffee with a greasy spoon. Swears he saw something big as a car with wings fly over his house last night. Scared his dogs half to death. Someone else, maybe one of the younger guys like me, would laugh. Probably just old Henderson's boy hitting the moonshine a bit early, Davies. Ain't just him, another local might pipe up, voice a bit lower. Folks been seeing things, out by the TNT area mostly. Glowing eyes, they say. The TNT area. That was the local spooky spot, I gathered. Acres of old concrete igloos, remnants of some World War II munitions plant, slowly being swallowed by the woods. Creepy enough in broad daylight, I reckoned. I'd just shake my head, pour another coffee from my thermos. Sounds like a good story for Halloween, boys. Me, I'll stick to worrying about this steel staying where it's supposed to. I wasn't rude about it, not really. But I figured it for local folklore, something to pass the time. Every place has its tales. Up north, it was lake monsters, or wendigos. Down here it was a big bird with glowing eyes. Right. But the land itself, it had a feel to it. Those Appalachian hills, they're old. Real old. And the rivers, carving their way through. Sometimes, looking down from the crane at the vast, dark expanse of forest stretching away from the riverbanks, I'd get a funny sort of feeling. Like the land was watching. Ancient. Indifferent. It was a fleeting thought, easy to dismiss with the next lift. Then, maybe early November, the rhythm started to change. It wasn't anything you could point to right away, just a shift in the background noise of the night. I was up in the cab one evening, the air still and mild for the time of year. I had the small window cracked, listening to the usual chorus. Crickets sawing away, the distant hoot of an owl, maybe some frogs down by the river if it was damp enough. And then I realized it was quieter than usual. The crickets seemed subdued. Huh, I thought. Getting colder than I figured. The next night, the crickets were gone. Not a peep. The owls too. The frogs. Silence. It was a strange kind of silence. Not peaceful, like a snowfall. This was tense. Like the whole natural world had suddenly decided to hold its tongue, all at once. You know how animals sometimes go dead quiet before an earthquake or a big storm? It felt like that. But there was no storm coming. The sky was clear, stars like chips of ice. I mentioned it to Earl, my oiler, during a pre-shift check. You notice how quiet it's gotten at night, Earl? No critters making a sound. Earl was a local older guy, face like a road map. He just spat a stream of tobacco juice and squinted up at the sky. Things get quiet when he's around, he muttered, almost to himself. He who? I asked. Earl just shook his head. Best not to talk about it, Frank. Bad luck. And that was all I got out of him. But the way he said it, the look in his eyes, it stuck with me. The silence deepened over the next week or so. It became the new normal. The only sounds were man-made. The hum of my crane, the occasional truck on the distant highway, the clank of steel from the site, if another shift was working some overtime. It was unsettling. You don't realize how much you rely on those little background noises until they're gone. It made the night feel hollow and bigger, like the darkness had more room to breathe. Sometimes, a faint, almost metallic smell would drift in on the breeze, or what little breeze there was, like ozone or scorched wiring. I'd sniff the air, look around. No fires, no electrical shorts I could see. Just that weird, sharp tang. And the air itself would feel charged, heavy. Made the fillings in my teeth ache a little. I started feeling jumpy. Me, Frank Kowalski, who'd worked high steel in city winds that'd make a preacher cuss. But up there, in that profound quiet, every little creak of the crane under load, every distant, unidentifiable sound from the town or the woods, it made me start. I found myself constantly scanning the darkness beyond the floodlights, my eyes straining. Looking for what? I didn't know, but I felt like I was being watched. Not by people, something else. One lunchtime, 2 a.m. break for us. We were in the trailer. Young Tommy Rourke, another out-of-towner on a different crane, was white as a sheet. You guys ain't gonna believe this, he said, his voice shaky. He was a young kid, barely out of his teens, usually full of jokes. Last night, I was swinging a load over by the west perimeter, near the woods there, and I swear to God, I saw these two big red lights in the trees, just hovering there, like eyes. Then they just blinked out. Old Man Davies, who was usually first with a spooky story, just slowly shook his head. Best leave it be, son. Some things out there, they don't like being seen. What was it, Davies? Tommy pressed, his voice cracking a bit. A bear? Some kind of reflection? Davies just looked down into his coffee cup. Weren't no bear, and weren't no reflection. Even the usual scoffers were quiet after that. The mood in the trailer got real heavy. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I hadn't seen any red lights. But Tommy's fear, that was real. And it fed into the unease that had been coiling in my own gut. The feeling of being watched intensified. Sometimes I'd get this overwhelming urge to turn around real fast, like something was right behind my cab, just out of the empty night sky and the steel framework of the crane. But the feeling lingered. Then came that night. Middle of November. Clear, cold, and the silence was absolute. It was a living thing, pressing in from all sides. I remember my hands felt clammy on the levers. Even the distant glow of Point Pleasant seemed dimmer, further away. I was working a tricky lift, guiding a big generator housing onto its foundation. Required a lot of concentration, delicate movements. I had the housing about halfway down, focused on the signals from the ground crew, their flashlights like fireflies way below. The air in the cab felt like ice. That metallic smell was stronger tonight. And then, a flicker. Not a light, not a sound, just a distortion in the darkness off to my left, towards the river and the black maw of the TNT area, like the air itself had shimmered for a microsecond. I told myself it was my eyes, Tired from staring into the floodlights, I refocused on the load, inches to go. The ground crew was waving me down, slow, slow. Then it happened. No warning, no buildup. 1 second, there was just the dark sky. The next, it was there. It wasn't flying like a bird. It was gliding. A monstrous black shape, silhouetted against the slightly less black sky, moving with impossible speed and a terrifying, unnatural grace. It came from the direction of the river, passing maybe 70-80 yards from my crane, parallel to the ground, but still high up. Its wingspan, God, it was enormous, wider than a small plane, but utterly silent. No whir of engines, no beat of wings, just this immense dark presence slicing through the night. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. I think I stopped breathing. My hands froze on the levers. It didn't seem to have a conventional head. The shape was man-like in a grotesque, elongated way, but the top just sort of melded into the massive, leathery-looking wings. And then, as it drew almost level with my cab, 2 points of light ignited on its upper torso. Red. Not the red of a warning light or a brake light. This was a deep, burning, hypnotic crimson, like looking into the heart of a furnace. They were large, perfectly round, and they stared. They stared right at me, directly into my cab. Time just stopped. In that moment, there was nothing in the universe but me, suspended in my little metal box, and those 2 glowing red eyes in that colossal winged shadow. I saw no malice in them, no discernible emotion at all. Just an ancient, cold, profound awareness. It saw me. It knew I was there, and it knew I was seeing it. I don't know how long it lasted. A second? An eternity? Then, as silently and swiftly as it had appeared, it banked slightly, tilting one vast wing and just dissolved back into the darkness towards the town. The red eyes lingered for a fraction of a second longer, 2 dying embers, then winked out. Gone. The silence it left behind was deafening, terrifying. I was shaking so hard the whole cab seemed to vibrate. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. The generator housing was still hanging, swaying slightly. Below, the ground crew were yelling, their voices faint and panicky. I'd completely frozen on the controls. Somehow, I got the load down. Don't ask me how. My hands were slick with sweat, my mind a total blank, except for that image. The dark shape, the silent glide, those burning red eyes. When my shift finally ended, and the gray, grudging light of dawn started to creep over the hills, I practically stumbled out of the crane. Henderson, the foreman, took one look at my face. "Kowalski, what in the Sam Hill happened to you? You look like you've seen the devil himself." I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. I pointed vaguely towards the river, towards the sky. Red eyes, I managed, my voice raspy. Big. Wings. Henderson's face, usually ruddy, went a shade paler. He exchanged a quick, worried glance with some of the other senior guys. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was tired. He just said, real quiet, "Go on home, Frank. Get some rest. We'll cover for you." The local papers were full of it over the next few days and weeks. More sightings, different people, different places, but always the same core description. A large, winged creature with glowing red eyes. They were calling it the Mothman. The name sounded ridiculous, childish, but what I'd seen, there was nothing childish about that. It was ancient, and it was terrifyingly real. I stuck out my contract, couldn't afford not to. But every night was a fresh hell. The silence was a constant companion, and now it had a face, or at least a pair of eyes. Every shadow that moved, every unexplained noise, I was convinced it was back. I drank a lot of coffee, smoked too many cigarettes, and jumped at my own shadow. I never saw that again. But the day that contract ended, I was packed and gone by daybreak. Didn't even say goodbye to most of the crew. I just had to get away from Point Pleasant, away from that river, away from the memory of those eyes. Months later, I was living out west, heard it on the radio news. December '67, the Silver Bridge, the one I used to watch from my crane cab, had collapsed into the Ohio. dozens dead. A terrible tragedy, and a cold dread seeped into my bones. All those stories, the sightings, the unease that had hung over that town like a shroud, had it all been leading to that? Was the thing I saw an omen, a harbinger of doom? Or was it something tied to the land, to the river, something disturbed by all our digging and building? I don't have the answers. I'm just an old crane man. But I know what I saw that November night. I know the silence that came before it. And I know that sometimes, when you're alone in the high, dark places, the things that watch you from the shadows, they have red eyes. And you'll never, ever forget them. And that's our story for this episode. We hope it gave you a few chills. If you enjoyed this journey into the unsettling, please take a moment to hit the like button. It really helps us out. And if you want to hear more eerie tales like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.